This is a bottle of Campbeltown Loch, and I probably should have talked about it many weeks ago now. And there's a reason I didn't, and the reason for that is that I meant to, and things just kind of got the better of me. But having had a chance to try this, having had a chance to kind of delve into it, to kind of dissect it, to see what other people have been thinking about it, and also to see sort of what the almost inevitable reaction on the secondary market to a Springbank of any kind of origin whatsoever has been, I have some thoughts on this one. So we're going to talk about sort of the taste of it, the smell of it, what the general experience of the whiskey is, and some musings, and there's going to be sort of a general update as well for kind of like my, not absence, I think absence is not quite the right word, but certainly more sporadic presence on here in the last 6 to 8 months. So we should start talking about Campbeltown Loch. What is it? What's this blended whiskey that everyone's going on about? It's a blended malt in a similar vein to a lot of what Compass Box do. Or the Johnnie Walker Green, which is to say that there is an absence of grain. So when we talk about Compass Box, obviously ignore hedonism as an example on that one, because that's all grain. This, I think Roy over at Aquavitae was one of the first people to kind of signpost this. It might not have been the first sort of indication that people had that it was going to be out on the market, but it was certainly how I found out about it. During one of his live streams, he started talking about this and started dissecting it and started talking about how wonderful it was and what the origins of it were, and pretty sure, sure enough, lots of people had it on their radar, and it became a fast sellout, though not as quick as I was expecting. I was able to get my hands on this without having to like wake up at 6 a.m. and like fight people in a queue or enter a ballot or do any of that nonsense. So in that respect, fairly lucky. And it is still available in certain places, but we'll get back to that. Campbeltown Loch, I fired into it. You know, I've had a few nips out of it. I would not say that I have been, you know, necking it by any stretch of the imagination. Myself and the Campbeltown style, I could take it or leave it. If I'm brutally honest, I can take it or leave it. I am not one of the Church of Springbank. The Springbank Tang is an excellent whiskey. I think anyone would be struggling to say that it's not an excellent whiskey. That is not to say that it's going to be everybody's taste. There are going to be some people that just don't care for it very much, or it just doesn't light their world on fire. And do you know what? If you are one of those people, fantastic. Do you know what? You're in a blessed position at the moment, because for people that adore it, I don't envy them, because it's tricky to get your hands on at the minute. It's like toilet paper a couple of years ago, and if you're watching this in 20 years and you're like, what are you on about? Was there a toilet paper shortage? There was a toilet paper shortage, children, and it was grim. It actually wasn't. Most of the corner shops still had it. It's just that nobody uses corner shops anymore. That was a scathing indictment of local business, if ever there was one, really. But anyway, back to this. Campbeltown Loch, it's a blend that has existed previously. I nearly dropped the bottle there. That would have been a disaster. But it has not existed in this particular iteration. It's a Springbank bottle, which obviously people are getting giddy about, and it has a lovely faux retro design on it. This is actually the newest iteration of it, but it looks old school without it actually being old school. And there is I was going to say a dove, well, it's not a dove, a bird of some description fucking off into the distance. 70 centiliters, 46% volume, all the usual good stuff of an integrity malt. And there are some words on the back as well. This blended malt Scotch whisky has been created solely from Campbeltown's 5 distinctive single malts. 100% Campbeltown whiskies, bottled and blended by Springbank Distillers, Campbeltown, Scotland. Herein lies the gimmick of this. This marries together all of the Campbeltown distilleries. So you've got Springbank, you've got Hazelburn, you've got Kilkerran, you've got Glen Scotia. Who am I missing? So the malt itself borrows from all of its constituent components, as you would imagine it would. It is very much the child of its mother and its father. Or in this case, a happy throuple? No, that's not quite right, because there's obviously more than 3 components. But anyway, it has components of all the whiskies. So you've got sort of a clean minerality from Hazelburn, you've got sort of citrus spicy notes from Springbank, you've got a bit of a funk from Kilkerran, there's a bit of peat from Longrow, and you've got kind of that weird funky dirtiness from Glen Scotia as well. There isn't a mention of specific kinds of casks that go into this. I don't think there needs to be honest. It's not the point of this whiskey. Some whiskies will rant and rave about the kinds of casks that go into it. Do Springbank know what they're doing with this? To a degree, yeah. They know what the market is, they know what the demand is, they know what's going to happen with this whiskey. Does it matter? Depends on your perspective on these things, really, doesn't it? For me, it's been a brilliant malt, or I should say blend. It's been bright, engaging, enticing. There's like a interesting kind of smoky, saline funk to it. And it's one of those whiskies that has kind of reminded me that there is an art to blending. And of course there is an art to blending, because the vast majority of malt whiskies that are out there, and this has been stated time and time again and will continue to be stated because people seem to forget about it or ignore it. Blending is a vital part of your favourite single malts. Obviously, if you get single casks, there's a different story there, but you know, there is still an element of that skill at play because you're still choosing a cask. But this does very much marry into the idea that it's not all just about Springbank. It's about all the distilleries in the region. And it showcases what the other distilleries can do. And it's an interesting move. Can you imagine Glenmorangie teaming up with one of their mortal enemies? Ben Romack. I'm not saying they are actually mortal enemies, but you know, a concern that is completely outside of their own little sphere of influence, and saying, hey, we've made a whiskey with this other guy's whiskey and we think it's pretty good and we're going to sell it to you. They wouldn't do that. So Springbank are still very much about the product. They're about making fantastic whiskey, whatever they need to do to get there. So they don't mind working with the neighbours. And that's nice. You know, I've never been to Campbeltown, but I am reliably told that they do things differently there. And it is on my to-do list, and I'm looking forward to the day when I can actually go there. Which brings me on to a point about sort of the state of Springbank in general. Anyone who's a fan of Springbank will know it's not too easy to get your hands on anymore. In fact, it's pretty bloody difficult. I was in Cadenheads quite recently, and I was actually picking something up which I would like to talk about at some point. There's a lot of whiskies that I'd like to talk about on this channel, and I think going forward we're going to do more about whiskey and less about other things. And if you miss the other things, don't worry, because I've got you covered, but that's for another conversation. But I was picking up this. It's a grain whiskey, North British. For many years, I was like, where is North British? That sounds like that's in like Northern England or something. And it turns out it is literally down the road from me. If I walk out my front door now, go down the street, turn left, and then just look down the street, I will see North British. I've walked past it to do my shopping many times, had no idea. It does not signpost itself. It doesn't go, hey, have tours here. It is very much a functional monster, an industrial powerhouse, a workhorse, get the fucking stuff made and get it in the bastard lorries and fuck it off to the distilleries kind of a distillery. It's for blends. And I've tried this fairly recently, and it's fucking stunning stuff. It might help that it's 28 years old, and it might help that Cadenheads really know their stuff. But why am I getting into Cadenheads? Well, Cadenhead and Springbank, parent ownership. Now, I was in the shop, in the Cadenhead shop in Edinburgh, and somebody else came in whilst I was looking at these bottles and deciding what I wanted. I very nearly went for a Glenwood instead, and then at the last second I spotted the grains, and I went, oh, do you know what, actually I'll go with that. And while I was picking, somebody came in and they went, do you have any Springbank? I would imagine that's a quite common question to get asked. And they went, yes. Now, even though I wasn't fully listening to the conversation, that shocked me. Somebody said yes, they do have Springbank. Now, to be fair, if anyone is going to have Springbank, it should be them. But still, it surprised me. And what happened in the next few minutes was the man went into the back, he came back with a bottle of Springbank, the cat has appeared. It's separate, the cat was not in the shop at the time. Hello Mo, how you doing? He's rubbing against the lamp so the lighting might go a bit skew-if. Hey buddy. And he went into the back and he produced a Springbank 10 and he wrapped it up, put it in a bag, and the man paid for it and walked out. And I had the feeling that you would have if you walked into an area of a building that you weren't supposed to be in and you witnessed a drug trade. And you were like, did they see me? Do they not care that I saw that? And then you just carried on with your day. Because the scarcity of Springbank has gotten to a point of sort of ridiculousness in many respects. There is a bottle of Springbank 10 in my dad's cabinet at home. I bought it 8 months ago to celebrate him coming out of hospital. It's still there. My dad is still alive. It'd be a stretch to say he's well, but he is still alive. And I had to return back to Manchester fairly recently to start clearing up one or two things, because we're looking towards sort of more the end of the road now. And if anyone who watches this channel has been wondering why things have been a bit more sporadic over the last 8 to 10 months, I would imagine that answers your question right there and then. There are other things that I need to focus on. It doesn't mean I'm going to ignore this or just abandon it completely, but it's the best I can do at the minute, just kind of keep it simmering over. One thing I will quickly say, actually, that I have noticed, he's playing with the wires now, it hasn't turned anyone away. Because I have noticed, even though my output on this channel has dropped dramatically, and I'll be the first to say it has dropped dramatically, no one's left. People that have kind of like clicked on subscribe and all the rest of it have stuck around and just kind of gone, I'll wait, it's fine. It is noticed, it's very appreciated, and I thank you all for it. Back to Campbeltown Loch. There's an argument to be made about whether 46% is more advanced, about whether it's a higher strength that maybe puts newer drinkers off. For its own part, Campbeltown Loch is eminently drinkable. Now, is that coming from a perspective of I've drank a lot of whiskey, I'm used to it now, and I'm looking towards more sort of advanced whiskey options, in air quotes? Possibly. It's difficult to say if you are in those shoes. It's difficult to put yourself out of those shoes, because once you're in them, how do you know? How do you tell that you are biased? How do you get yourself out of bias? Can you? It's the issue with doing this, is that it is broadly subjective. But for my part, it is a eminently drinkable, honeyed, sweet, interesting, funky, saline, oddly savoury, funky, slightly peaty. It's kind of all over the map. It does a bit of everything. So it's a fascinating whiskey. This in the glass is not Campbeltown Loch. So I've been talking about it. Well, I wanted to acknowledge that I've had it, and I wanted to share my own thoughts on it. And my own thoughts on it being that it's a lovely blended malt, but to make a point that it's broadly gone now, except for those rare circumstances where you walk into a tiny little shop in Edinburgh and somebody asks for it and they happen to have some in the back because they're the people that supply it. Or you have a bottle kicking around in the cabinet of a relative who either hasn't gotten round to or just hasn't been able to drink it yet. And the point I want to make is that it doesn't matter. Obviously, if you love Springbank, you're going to want to get your hands on a bottle of it. And there's that mad scramble, and it is a mad scramble right now. The producers at Springbank are doing everything right, and they're not doing it that way because they just want to scalp. They could. They absolutely could. They are there. They have made it. They are at Macallan level, I would say, right now. And I don't pretend to be an expert on these things. But the value of Springbank and its associated brands is ridiculous. But they still retail it at a sensible price themselves. There are retailers that will play shenanigans, that will play games, that will take the piss. It happens. It's out there. It's an unfortunate circumstance of its popularity. But despite that, they continue to knock out fantastic whiskey, and I think this is a good example of them not taking the piss. They could have released anything in a Springbank bottle, and it would have done alright. But they decided to release something that was a curiosity, of interest, of integrity. It shows that they still care. And that's part of the reason why there's that whole fan base, the scarcity as well. That and they don't produce a great deal to begin with, but it's in high demand because it's extremely good quality. But it doesn't mean you should chase it to the ends of the earth. Now, I paid £37 for this, but £37 and a bit of change for this bottle. Fucking bargain. Good luck getting it for that now. I've seen it on auction sites go for, I think the highest was 95 I saw it go for. Most peaked around about mid-60s. Way too much. It's lovely, but it's way too much money. What I've got in the glass right now is that Carnmore Sauterne from a few months ago that I wasn't very happy about. I'm still not. It was about twice the price. Price does not dictate quality. It just doesn't. It's a hard-learned lesson for me, but it's a lesson learned nonetheless. And you should take that forward yourself. Let me do the financial damage on that one. But I will say as well, if you're in the UK and you fancy a nip of this, I've got plenty of it. I've got a few bottles. Ask nicely, I might send you some. Whiskey's best when it's shared, ain't that right, Roy? I think he wants fed. So I should wrap this up by saying thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much for sticking around. Have you tried Campbeltown Loch? Have you had an opportunity? Did you know it existed? Are you fascinated by it? Would you like to try it? Let me know. Thank you very much for watching, and do join me next time, where I'll be drinking something else.